Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome all our panelists onto our screens. Dr. Carrine, a very, very warm welcome to you. And I hand over the session to you for the further proceedings.
Thank you, Master Ceremony. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Dr. Carrine 𝐸𝐲. So today we have a panel of esteemed speakers, I would say. So we have Mr. Abdullah Attas and also Mr. Demetris Booth. So welcome, both of you, and it's nice to see you. So I would like to, yes, hi. So I would like to introduce Mr. Abdullah Attas first. Mr. Abdullah Attas is currently the head of cybersecurity in PLUS Malaysia Berhad. Abdullah is a seasoned information security professional with over 14 years of working experience in the field. And he is also currently involved in digital transformation for PLUS. And in terms of digital transformation, Abdullah Attas is a very seasoned, I would say, professional in terms of digital transformation. So this current transformation is actually his fourth digital transformation, right? And yeah, so in his current digital transformation in PLUS, he actually covering both in terms of strategy and also the operating model formation for PLUS, right? Abdullah actually started on his career in information security, focused mainly in building CSIRT, actually, right, for all the United Nations member countries under the guidance of ITU. So he and his team have also built CSIRT foundation capabilities aligned with the FIRST, or the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams, guidelines that cover both all from technology, process, and also people, right? So that is our esteemed Abdullah Attas. And next we have Mr. Demetris Booth, who is currently the Product Marketing Director of APJ Singapore of Cato Networks. So Demetris leads the strategic engagement around the Cato Cloud Native approach to secure access service edge, or the SASE. He is a strong advocate and champion of network and security convergence, promoting SASEs as the pathway to better business and also technical outcome. Prior to Cato, Demetris held with various leadership roles with Sophos, Cisco, Juniper, and Citrix System. With over 20 years of experience in this technology, Demetris is actually, I would say, we won't call it the industry veteran, we'll call it he is the Sifu, the gurus. So he actually brings in a diverse and global perspective, having lived and worked both in North America, Europe, and also Asia. So yeah, with that, I would like to proceed on to our panel for today. So as we know that the panel discussion for today is overcoming cybersecurity hurdles with artificial intelligence. So we heard the word artificial intelligence, or AI, very frequently. So what is artificial intelligence? So AI actually brings cognitive ability to grow, to learn, and also to carry out tasks that is based on algorithm. It can learn from data within organization and also search externally through blogs, reports, research, and also security alerts from anywhere and everywhere. So the rise of AI adoption actually have skyrocketed for the past 18 months. And this is based from Harvard Business Review. So we know that AI is here to stay and is actually going to impact us more and actually going to bring us more value. And with that also bring us more risk. So thus the panel discussion today. So we're also looking into AI, how can it help in terms of security posture advancement, from chaining together all the different potential incidents automatically to driving deeper investigation in a fraction of time, or maybe automated incident response and so forth. So yeah, so I would like to bring in our discussion for today. So the first question is, I would like to seek the opinion for both my panelists today. What's your opinion in terms of the use of cyber AI in detection of fraud and improving the overall network security to prevent data breaches? So we'll start with Mr. Abdullah Attas then.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I mean, before we go to AI, if you look at how it's the detection right now of cyber incidents or detection of fraud, sometimes it depends, it becomes subjective from the analyst or the one investigation who look into it, right? In some situation, there are some defined metrics or defined threshold that we look into it. But that tend to be missed in some occasion because they will feel like, no, it's not relevant, or they might even miss some elements of investigation that they have not looked to it. By introducing AI, you are able to have, you have defined a certain threshold that will be applied in all your investigations, right? Rather than having different analysts viewing differently. And then you will have a systematic way where you can investigate. You have a coverage of investigations that cover every element you're suspecting of it. Eventually, the human elements will come in as a validations or a reviewer to make sure that all those elements has been investigated, and that in that way will speed up the investigation process or detection of frauds, right? And this is where the beauty of AI comes into place to make sure that your investigation become more faster. And we always talk about the mean time to response or mean time to recover, and these AI or artificial intelligence, machine learning will help us to respond more faster and recover more faster, right? So this is my view and how the AI will come into picture, and how if we built it correctly, you know, and put in the right rules and the right metrics in place, will help us to recover and detect faster, right?
Thank you, Abdullah. All right, Demetris, would like to, what's your opinion on this topic? Anything to add on this question?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. And definitely, you know, I want to pick up on one of the things that you called out, the human factor with regards to the current way things are done as far as you know, network detection and mitigating risk across the across enterprises. You know, there is a limitation, you know, with what humans can do with what current software systems today can do. And where AI comes into play, it really serves as sort of that augmentation per se, you know, for anomaly detection and network security, you know, and it can be trained to, you know, to recognize, you know, complicated traffic patterns, detect emerging threats and malicious network activities, you know, and at a much faster rate than humans can. You know, it can detect, you know, some of the smallest traffic patterns that will deviate from the norm inside of various networks. And, you know, these are some of the things that, like I said, you know, humans and traditional software systems just can't keep up today. And, you know, there are many companies out here today that, that do variations of artificial intelligence and machine learning, you know, in their detection schemes, and everyone applies it differently. And not every implementation of it will be equally effective, you know, in every architectural situation. You know, so if I can address this a little deeper from a Cato Networks perspective, and I'll try not to make this a sales presentation, but you know, we sort of have a unique global private cloud architecture that allows us to see, you know, deeper into our customers' data flows to help us detect and prevent threats across the entire network, you know, and we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning to mine the network itself for these suspicious flows that are based upon, you know, numerous data points that are uniquely available to us because of our private backbone. And this process allows us to more rapidly identify threats and initiate the appropriate prevention strategies, you know, to protect our customers. You know, so this from a high level, this is just like one application or method that AI is really used to improve network security. But as I said, you know, every cybersecurity vendor out here has a version that they're deploying in order to do it. But at the end of the day, you know, no matter how AI is applied, there are things that non-negotiable that it has to be able to do, and, you know, it has to be able to delineate between suspicious and benign flows and instances, and it must be able to understand the context of the data. That's really important, to understand the context of the data in order to detect and predict deviations of normal daily traffic patterns so they can prevent current and future attacks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think both you actually give very good insight on this topic. And I think what Demetris was thinking, like AI should be able to smart enough to filter out the noise and everything. And then I think one of the things that Abdullah actually have highlighted is about setting threshold. And that also determine on what's the organization risk appetite is like, at which threshold does the human have to step in and validate and proceed on to the next step and everything. I think AI is still a technology, the human factor and the decision making, it should still lies on the people side or the human side, right? So we move on to the next question. So we're talking about how autonomous cyber AI can revolutionize whole cyber defense, because we always know that in terms of cybersecurity, there was always offense and defense, right? So of course, we'd like to discuss about, so how does cyber AI gonna revolutionize cyber defense against the future AI attacks? So we'll start with Demetris for this question.
Okay, thanks a lot for this one. Well, I mean, I think it's common knowledge, we're continuing to see, massive increases in cyber attacks. And, with everyone today, accelerating their digital journey, this is just going to increase. And, it's also creating additional gaps in enterprise cyber defenses. So this dramatic increase has only proven that and it goes back to the previous question, and one of the things Abdullah called out was, that the human factor in cyber defense, while it was never going to go away, it definitely has its limitations in defeating these next generation of attacks. So this is one of many reasons why autonomous AI, is going to become a very critical asset to businesses in their ongoing fight to defend against these advanced threats. It can act as sort of that cyber immune system to, against these threats to businesses. It can detect, at a more rapid rate, zero-day attacks, even isolate these threats before they become, do intensive damage to networks. And what we're also going to find out is that, that autonomous AI it'll adapt to your network, it'll grow with your network, it'll move with the network. And I jokingly like to say it sets up like the ultimate fighting match, AI versus AI. But there's one thing I also want to note here, because there's to this the question about the AI attacks. Today, there is very limited evidence of the so-called AI-based attacks. And what I mean by that is that there is little, if anything, known about the demographics of such attack, the characteristics, the features, the descriptions, of an AI-based attack. So how can we truly differentiate an AI-based attack from any other attack? So while I'm not going to say it's pure theory, because it's not, but what I would say is that we have to remember that at the end of the day, an attack is an attack. And we have to continue shifting our focus from, the post-breach responses to the early detection, automated and autonomous responses. And at the end of the day, we're really trying to get the best possible outcomes for our cybersecurity systems. And this is the way that we're going to get the best possible outcome for all organizations, around APAC and around the world as a whole. So, thank you. So back to you.
Thank you. I think, I think so now is the scene is the AI fighting the AI. So I think that's a good way to say it. Yeah, so Abdullah, so what would you like to add for this question?
I mean, I hope we're not going to face Skynet or something like that. But just to add into that, whenever we have an attack, we never know it's an AI attack or not, as you mentioned. But if you look at how AI can help, so if I describe it in a way that, cyber defense, when you look at things, they look at it as a funnel. You have a lot of attack comes in, and you try to funnel those attacks to see which one is the most targeted to you or is the most high cyber risk to you, right? And the more you expand your digital transformation, the bigger the funnel become for you. So this is where you need to make sure that your ability to detect and ability to respond is become more. and we should not be focused on detection. We become more in terms of proactive in terms of preventing such things. So the shift of the cyber defense is going to, in a way, where become more proactive to detect those suspicious cyber risk and how we mitigate it as much as possible. So we minimize that surface of the funnel that comes in. And if we miss any of those, that is going to go through the funnels to where we need to detect it, then the AI at the end of the tunnel should be able to detect or filter out all those common attacks. So your team should not be really busy with those common attacks. So a good example, you used to say a lot of port scanning. We should not be bothered about those, right? But AI should pick all those things and should be able to have a way where you can prevent it or do some activities like like automations or a part of the SOAR, or to make sure it's been closed or prevented, right? Or maybe even provide to the security team or the IT team that this is suspicious. Do you want to do something about it or not? So so what I'm trying to say is that the AI eventually should help the teams to really focus on the key areas they need to investigate. They should help them to pick up some key areas that for them to highlight that this is potential risk. They need to look into it. I think the previous presentations by I forgot what's the organization name, but it give you a good example. That how to become more proactive in terms of that. And there are many different ways how we can do it, but that's one of them. Become more proactive to detect, and then how eventually we become more, ability to become more fast in terms of detection it and responding, right? And it's very key eventually. If things pass through, we'll be able to recover more faster, right? So my management always asks me, okay, if things hit the fan, we put all those layers. And then are we able to recover pretty quickly or not? So eventually we should have the ability, to recover quickly, and we should not only focus on the detections, but also how we make sure, as far as detection, as far as cyber defense, how we're able to recover back from that particular incident if it happened, right? So AI should not fall into one category of area. Should you look at it from holistically, from end to end, more proactive. When things happen, be able to detect it. If pass through, then how we be able to recover from it, right? So that's my look into it, and I think we are going that way. A lot of organizations coming to that, and let's see how things progressing for that.
Yeah, I think that is very true. There's always a saying that it's not about which organization will be attacked, it's about whether when they find out they've been attacked, the sort of scenario. So yeah, it's like what Abdullah has mentioned earlier on about how fast we recover. For every organization is recovery. How fast can we get back on our feet is very, very important. And I think one thing that I'd like to highlight over here is that the difference between offense and defense is the relationship is always one to many and many to one. When you attack, there are many to one, and and when you defend, you are one and defending from everyone. So I always believe the relationship is always one to many and many to one. So we are always on the tough part, right? So that is the part that we are in. So yeah, and I think I also like the idea about the funnel and everything. This is when we know that we can't be handling every attack the same way. So it's always good to have this funnel system where we can actually look into, I always believe in the rule of about the 80-20. What is the 20 that's going to impact the 80 of the organization? So pick up what are the priority and what's the critical that you need to solve now, that you need to be hands-on and is urgent and important. So I always believe that that's actually a good way to look into attacks and also cybersecurity, the 80-20 rules and everything. Yeah, I think that's very interesting discussion for that question. So yeah, we would like to talk about our dynamic workforce in cybersecurity. So yeah, so maybe, I think we'll continue with you, Abdullah. So how does cyber AI protect the dynamic workforce in cybersecurity?
Let me just start off by defining, I mean, my perspective, how I define dynamic workforce, and the way how I see it right now is based that they are not bounded by certain parameters. They are everywhere, like where we are right now. We have a workforce who are working from home, workforce working from, coffee shops, or even some of them who are in the office, right? So how dynamically, how we make sure they are protected, and we have that ability to make sure that all of them, they have the same standard of security protections applied to them wherever they are. I think I want to bring up the point that Demetris mentioned earlier, that having an intelligent cloud that will make sure that all the data that is being transmitted eventually to the cloud is give them an early alerts that things happening somewhere else, and how about it's going to impact the organizations. And it need to also, the AI should be able to really reflect into it in terms of the cyber risk of the business, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because you have many organizations, you have in the organization, you have many hierarchies. There are some people who are relevant to, who are not really have that high risk from the way how they work or their day-to-day job activities, right? They can only have a desktop, they just connect emails and they go ahead, right? But then other people who have a laptop, they're moving around. So this need to be fed to the AI to make sure that they understand the cyber risk that people are moving around. They're more prone to cyber attacks because they could be plugging the USB, they could be connected to their Wi-Fi that is not have the right security practice in place, right? And by having that intelligent security practice that is not bounded by our locations, is the way forward to it. Because I've seen, I mean, I've seen some organization during my consultancy days that they're still sticking that on solution that is give them data based on the dashboard, or it's just look at it on-prem, but there's no intelligence that connect back to the cloud to feed them that there's something happening for you, right? And now with the COVID, what happened is that there a lot of them they're shifting to the cloud, but they're still thinking like, should I do this now? But eventually I'm going back. Is that investment correct for me or not? It's not about that investment. It's about that how to make sure eventually you are up to date to the potential cyber risk and be able to proactive to detect it, and more faster to respond to it more quicker, right? If I did not able to proactively block it, then eventually things have been hit. Then the intelligence will tell you, what, something happened, what XYZ laptops, so I should enhance or protect all the other laptops with the certain IOCs or certain signatures, right? So it's the way forward for that, and we should not be shy away that to explore a solution that is not bounded to a certain location, but it should be a dynamic where we can have more dynamic activities or threat intelligence to prevent and protect our users, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Abdullah. I think the challenge is always because the workforce itself, and now they are dynamic, so it makes it much more challenging for everyone. So yeah. So Demetris, what's your input on this?
One thing that pops into my head immediately is like, we've always said it's always been the human factor that's been the biggest challenge with regards to cybersecurity. Now after COVID and it's work from anywhere, it's just like going through the roof, One of the things Abdullah mentioned was about the consistent security. And the thing that popped into my head is that we always say that there's no silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. And I was thinking, damn, wouldn't it be cool if that silver bullet was cyber AI, configure security once, and boom, it's consistent all the way through your enterprise, And that's one area where, eventually that it could potentially protect the dynamic workforce. Do it once, make sure and let it propagate throughout your entire enterprise, and then it's completely consistent. So everyone gets consistent protection all the way through. But I think we will be looking at cyber AI, to be able to to reveal some natural traffic flows that are going, within the organization. So how, devices are communicating, how data itself is transferred, and even how, end user computing behaviors are going to affect, the security posture of an organization. Detect a lot of these deviations between the user and the network itself, and just autonomously just respond to these threats, in seconds. Where it's it would take normal human teams like days, weeks, or months, or whatever like that. I think what we'll also be looking at cyber AI to do is to be in that agile partner per se that's going to adapt with us and change, and be able to take the appropriate measures that it's ensuring compliance and security. Because with this work from anywhere dynamic we have today, that's the compliance and security is the biggest worry of pretty much every enterprise, every organization out there. So this would mean that AI is going to have to, provide more in-depth visibility into everything that's going on inside the networking environment, and provide a full range of detection for any and all threats, and then take the necessary steps to mitigate and prevent these threats as best as possible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think what this work from home and also the whole COVID pandemic, and where we just basically can be anywhere, and we still input back into the organization, no more secured land and everything. So basically what we actually have is augmented people risk in terms of cybersecurity. Yeah, so yeah, I think we're all looking forward to a day where we actually have a silver bullet, and both all the end users and all the people will actually be cyber risk aware automatically, So I think that's the day. I think that's something that you should be looking at. So yeah, till then, I think AI is good to detect behavior patterns and everything for users and everything. Any anomaly in terms of behavior or access of accounts and everything. I think that is that we can do for today. So yeah. So and next question, right? This comes with a saying that's very famous that I like till now, which is like, with great power comes great responsibilities. Okay, so now the question is, how do we ensure that AI is designed and used responsibly? So yeah, I think we'll start with Abdullah.
Right, I like that, Yes. Well, I think it's that defining a real segregation of what the AI can do and what your team can do it needs to be defined clearly, right? And the first thing that we need to put in mind that not everything AI will do is the right thing. As Demetris mentioned, AI will never know exactly in detail the context of that transaction or data, unless it needs some maybe years of that transaction to happen for it to really understand it, right? AI will in some cases need to be validated. It will assume few things as a potential threats, but then when you look into it, it's that no, this is how currently I'm interacting with my business partner, and unfortunately this is how it's done. We're trying to figure out the right way, but we need time to do it, right? So where the validation team comes in to make sure that whether this is potential threats or not is quite essential, right? So it's very important that we define some kind of certain roadmaps and we put in the potential use cases or potential errors that may happen. We may not put everything, but I think we put some kind of assumption. This is the potential cases we need to look into it, and we let the AI to build into it. So a good example, in my previous organization, we were trying to test in the AI for some activities. There are some use cases that have been tested. It took us, I think, we were testing it for a few months to make sure it's been correctly invalidated. And we see during those days or during the month, there is a better percentage of correct detections happening exponentially, right? So it may not happen in the first day or second day, but after 6 months, we see a quite high increase of better detections and correct of the potential threats. But eventually, there's a gap that the team comes in to validate for that, which is, I think, previously was around 40% they had to validate of those potential detection that happened by the AIs. So always we have to set clear to the leadership or the management that having the AI does not mean we are taking our workforce or reducing them. No, but we are enable them to be excel in the career in different areas, and then help them to look at that huge amount of threats that keep coming in. Because as the organization go into digital transformations, the cyber risk is also increasing with it. You know, it's not we go into digital transformation that our cyber is reducing. No, it's increasing because we are opening up more space or area for the attacker to comes in. So AI will help us to filter a lot of things that is that make a lot of noise and make the team focus on key areas or potential threats that we need to focus on it, right? And that is very crucial, that communication to higher to management, that having this is not replacing or improving, but is more like, you know, how become more efficient on in our detections and responding to it, right? So that communication is very clear, and if we have that, everyone will be aligned, and expectation will be set clearly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think yeah, I think that is true, because the thing is that eventually is how to make AI work better for everyone. I think that's the goal for everyone anyway. So Demetris, so how shall AI be designed and used more responsibly? What's your thoughts?
Very carefully. You know, I think honestly, I think developing a responsible and ethical AI, it's really the responsibility of the developer and their teams. And they need to take, you know, very detailed steps to ensure that they are eliminating as much bias as possible, and also ensuring as much transparency in the process as possible. You know, you know, ethics and transparency obviously is going to vary from company to company, you know, but there are obviously some steps that organizations, both organizations that are using AI and organizations that are developing AI, you know, can take in order to ensure that they're being ethical and responsible. You know, so, you know, maybe one of the steps is, you know, being able to specifically define, you know, what problem you're trying to solve. And this is kind of sort of a cybersecurity thing too, like, okay, so what problems are you trying to solve before you go out buying different tools? So understanding when you're developing an AI solution or AI algorithm, understanding what problem you're trying to solve, and being able to identify, you know, different data points in there that, excuse me, that may unintentionally lead to bias. You know, and this really goes also to understanding, you know, the implicit biases that the development teams may have, the engineers, the product managers, designers, everyone, and ensuring that these biases are not necessarily embedded, you know, within the code. So I have a little story around this one here. You know, so in the early days of COVID, you know, we're here in Singapore, you know, when we were able to go out, you know, to have go out to restaurants and things like that. A lot of stores were experimenting with a lot of these little tablets that had this little facial recognition thing that would look, you put your face in there, and then it would measure, you know, the temperature and everything. You know, so you pull the mask away and it would look at everything. You know, so my wife and I, we would go out for dinner or anything like that, and, you know, she would do it and it would register hers right away. I would do it and nothing, you know, no temperature or anything. You know? So what this told me was that AI had a bias towards very beautiful Asian women and a bias against very ugly non-Asian men. You know, but I mean, that's just one area where, you know, maybe some validation didn't take place, you know, before they released that particular application, you know. So that's one thing that can be done. Another thing, and it goes back to one of the points that Abdullah highlighted was the validation piece. And you have to understand, what you're working with. Understand, the data, understand the models you're putting in place. And have processes there to be able to measure, the effectiveness of the data that's or the algorithms that are being produced. Another point, and I'm kind of sort of regurgitating your points that you brought up, Abdullah, so I have to give you a high five here. So you highlighted one part was about the review process as well. That's very, very important too. We have to ensure that that the teams themselves, they're not just deploying or developing, in these little silos. They have to have a process in place where they have, multiple phases of review, and maybe even with, neutral third-party validators or independent bodies or whatever like that. So these are really critical areas that I think will help us in the process of having more responsible and more ethical AI. But I think there are a lot of things that we can do and a lot of things the developer can do. But at the end of the day, the responsibility relies on the developer or the deployers of the AI technology.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very interesting point, and that's a very good story. So I must say that it's the same as the time we're talking about, the eye detection, the iris thingy. So it's like it doesn't work for Asian because we all got brown eyes. So there's no lines, there's no patterns that you can pick up and everything. So it just doesn't work. So I think, yeah, I think it's the same side. Like I think for developers, and I think there's are things that they need to look at when they do testing, sampling size, all this, they need to broaden. And now the world is getting more global. So yeah, your end users is everyone,
Yeah.
So I think there's something that, so it's not only the end users that's developing, but also, I'm pretty sure that developers team is also been a mixture of everyone now. So they should pretty much take that into consideration. So
yeah, I think people be a little more mindful these days.
Yes, and more sensitive.
They've been called out, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, and I think from both the discussion earlier on, one thing that I like is that it all boils down to accountability and responsibility. So I think eventually in the whole process, we need to highlight who is accountable, who is responsible. Yes, of course, AI would do certain things, but for each of the step, each of the process, they should be accountable and responsible party being involved so that we can see the whole AI from development all the way to end users, so then the whole thing, people will be more mindful in their actions and also in terms of how they set the threshold, right? So yeah, and eventually it's all about making AI to be, humanizing it, and also making it work from the business side to the technical side and everything. So how to improve and all that. Yeah, and a good point that Demetris pointed, ethics. Everyone talks about cyber ethics all the while, and now with AI, ethics actually it's AI is going to be so smart. It's going to be replacing a lot of our thought process, a lot of tasks and everything. So I think ethics have to be highlighted in this case, right? Yeah, so yeah, okay, so we move on to the next question. So basically this panel is talking about how we're going to overcome cybersecurity hurdles with AI. So now this question, we'll start with Demetris. How are AI and machine learning is impacting and changing cybersecurity?
Okay. Well, I look at how it's changing cybersecurity, in three key ways. Okay, so everyone is like in fear of the massive attack that'll eventually hit our organization. So where I think AI machine learning is really going to impact cybersecurity is in the areas of malware detection and classification. So being able to have real-time identification of malware, ransomware threats, it's very important. Being able to categorize, what the nature of that particular threat is very important. You need to be able to track endpoints to understand, new processes, new behaviors and everything. And this is this again is a continuous process, and having the appropriate models, AI models, to differentiate between the behavior patterns of devices and of network flows. This is really critical, and this is one area where artificial intelligence is really going to benefit enterprises today. Another area would be AI-based threat mitigation. Hackers today. Someone mentioned in a couple of sessions earlier today how hackers are really going all in on AI and machine learning for their threats. So we have to do the same thing for mitigation. So hackers are going to use various types of information to get control of enterprises. We're going to have to kind of sort of like put ourselves in the hacker mode, and this is where AI is going to help do this for us, give us the hacker mentality, so that we can actually start protecting ourselves or protecting enterprises. So we always say that there's no silver bullet, and I think by having appropriate AI-based threat mitigation, it helps bring some of that silver bullet thinking out, so that enterprises can start taking the necessary precautionary necessary steps to defend and protect their environments. And I think another area is I'd say AI-enabled penetration testing. Okay, so we all know that penetration testing is going to identify vulnerabilities. Well, with AI-enabled penetration testing, it'll have the ability of taking the outcomes of the penetration tests themselves, prioritize it based upon the knowledge of the infrastructure, and be able to predict the possible remediation steps that an organization is going to have to take in order to close off or eliminate those vulnerabilities. But at the end of the day, I mean, there are other use cases like API security, like risk assessment and things like that. But at the end of the day, AI I don't think it's ever going to completely replace, the human task, but it's going to be able to augment the human or the systems administrators and all of these critical cybersecurity tasks that I just mentioned there.
Thank you. I think that's very insightful. Thank you. Yeah, Abdullah, what would you like to add to that?
It's very difficult to add into that.
I know. So I'm like, wow.
So if I want to add in just a bit, excuse me, Demetris, just to add a bit into that, is that AI will provide some kind of sort of a consistency of how we can detect or prevent cyber attacks, right?
Yeah, very true.
And the reason why I'm saying this is because you put it in a certain process in place that be fixed and be followed clearly, right? And you can set in a certain threshold. Eventually, I mean, it's supposed to be artificial intelligence, but also look at things differently and add in different elements into it, and to give more senses or probability as part of it. Then it will give you a better, efficiency in terms of detections back. So, because as I mentioned earlier, is that currently the SOC team or the analysts who are looking at potential threats, the way how they analyze threat is not consistent. Everyone have a different trainings, everyone have a different experience, everyone have a different point of view, and how we investigate. Even though you have built, let's say, playbooks that step 1, step 2, step 3, but it's not followed by the book, right? So AI will bring that, and on top of this, added more contextuals or more input data from different sources that able to process it more quicker, right? And then the human elements will comes in to validate. So instead of we are looking at those data and we're trying to collect all the elements of data to analyze, does it make sense with potential threats? AI will pick that for us. We just validate it for it. Or even with times, eventually we don't have to validate because it's already been have gone through a process where it become more proficient on it, and they have a probability of 100% or maybe 99% of accurate detections, right? So this is where the AI value will comes in, and just to highlight, does not replace the human elements. Human elements eventually will move into a different areas that AI was not able to touch into it, right? Like, strategic thinking, how we can improve this, how we making sure that the different business value or business risk can be incorporated into our detections or cybersecurity strategies. This cannot be done by artificial intelligence, but the human elements will come in and maybe add in some kind of probabilities, or maybe some rules, or some metrics, or parameters that enable the AIs to think of it and add in some kind of equations or probability into it to improve detections, right? So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I think that's
Can I add one more thing? As you were talking, Abdullah, something popped into my head that I never considered before, and that is maybe where we're headed is that the humans are kind of sort of will be the generals, and AI will be our foot soldiers that are going to be out there on the field that are really doing the fighting and the battling. So
that was what I was gonna say. Is like now AI actually have increased our cybersecurity tasks. Actually now have moved up the ladder. So basically our thinking skills, our thinking will be more on the strategic side rather than just more, day to day. And so, yeah, we are becoming generals. So, yeah. So, yeah, and I think like another thing that both of you have highlighted is about how AI actually, I would say that it simulates the cyber risk for us. It augments all our cyber threats and cyber risks. So basically, it actually spreads out all the risks that's potentially possible and everything. So it's like, as what Abdullah was saying, that rather than different analysts would bring in based on their experience and their angle. So everyone's angle is always different. But with AI, is like basically they have the whole ocean and they'll just drop out. These are all your risks. And this is when we come in and for us to actually, I would say that funnel down, what are real to us, and then we prepare for that. What are the potential cyber response, the recovery that we can do, how fast we can do it, and so forth. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. So yeah, potential is great, and we are moving to become general. So that's great news. So
yeah, power.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like to open the question for the audience if you have any.